Welcome to the podcast, Leading Change. I'm your host, Adam Christie. Oh, people, we've got an amazing guest for you today. His talk is going to be unbelievable. You're going to learn so much from it. I just found out recently about him. And once you hear from him, you're going to be like, oh man, he's great. And you're going to find his website and you're going to read his books. And it is fantastic. You're going to eat up as much as you can because he is great. Our country's best kept secret, in my opinion. Now, he is a veteran Silicon Valley-based engineering leader who builds both people and product at historic companies such as Slack, Borland, Netscape, Palantir, Pinterest, and Apple. When he's not deeply worried about staying relevant, he writes some amazing content on backpacks, bridges, people, and leadership in his popular blog, Rands Repos. You can see that below. You can find his blog at randsrepos.com. He currently works at Apple. This is the way. Ladies and gentlemen, Michael Lopps. Michael, thanks so much for being with us today.
Happy New Year, Grad. I'm very happy to be here.
Oh man, this year is going to be great. I just know it.
It can be nothing but, I guarantee it. I don't guarantee it, but I'm
Can't
very
get
hopeful.
worse. Yeah. Michael, tell us, two of the books you've written, Managing Humans and the Art of Leadership, but there's a third written in between the two. Would you tell us about that one?
Yeah, I have another book called Being Geek that I did with another book that I did with O'Reilly as well. So it went Managing Humans, then it went Being Geek, and then went Art of Leadership. Managing Humans is on its third edition, and it's the fourth edition is coming out this summer. I'm working on it right now.
Awesome. So let's jump straight into leadership. What is your definition of a leader?
Yeah, the first book is called Managing Humans, and I don't really like the title anymore because to circuitously get to answer your question, because I think it's far more interesting to be a leader of the humans than to actually manage them. So the short answer is really what I always think of is managers kind of tell you where you are, and leaders tell you where you're going. Sort of like, this is our plan, this is the way. So it's sort of the humans, whether they have the title or not, are the ones who are kind of telling you this is where we should be going and inspiring you or giving you the tools or the coaching or the support or the money or whatever to actually kind of go and do whatever you're going to go do.
So you say managers tell you where you are and leaders show you where you're going. Can you be both?
Yeah, absolutely. And the dichotomy makes it sound like I think I'm negative on managers. It's fine to be a manager, but to me it's far more tactical a job of like handling things and being and getting the things done, as opposed to sort of what I think is the harder part of growing a team and leading a team is getting us to go to that next thing, leading us to the other thing. So, in the thesaurus, they're probably in the same bucket. But I think again, leaders are if you choose to use that word to describe the work that you do, you're being far more strategic. You're being more of a visionary, and you're driving towards something.
Do you have to have followers to be a leader?
No. And you don't, it's a really good question. It's a subtly good question because people will follow you when you do a good job being a leader, but they don't see themselves as followers. They see themselves as partners in what you're doing, right? And they're inspired by you because you said this thing or you had this vision or whatnot. But and you do need a team to get a large thing done. But I think people will follow you, to use your word, or partner with you when you're doing a good job. And it's not like it's not minions or anything like that. These are the people that we're going to collectively go get this thing done. And so I bristle a little about the word followers because it's more about inspiring them to join you on this adventure.
So would you say that instead of followers, maybe partners would be a better title?
Yeah, I think that the term manager or leader or whatever the title is often comes with this hierarchy, and it's like, well, she or he's the person who must know because they have I must trust them because they have the title, and that can be a shortcut or a hack. But I much prefer to be joined in doing a thing because someone believes in me, or because I've demonstrated competency, or because I've told them a good story about where we should go and why.
So you've mentioned a couple of times about teams, and I'm wondering, um, are there certain types of people you look for when you're trying to build a team?
It depends answer, because it sort of depends what is the project or the problem or the thing that we're trying to go do. So, but the general answer is I always look for sort of the puzzle pieces that kind of fit with me, because I'm great at some things and I'm bad at others. And to really be able to get whatever the thing is that we're going to go choose and do, we're going to need a complete set of humans to get that done. So I'm a strategy guy. I'm the vision guy. I will tell you where we're going. I'm not that great at the tactical day-to-day stuff. So I've tried for years to be great at it. And I always gonna get a B, because it's sort of not my core competency. I can do it and I can do fine. So what does that mean? That means that any team that I'm working with and building, I'm going to find some folks that are just operational experts. They're the program managers or the project managers or a chief of staff or those sorts of things. So it's more augmenting sort of augmenting my skill set. So we have sort of a complete set of people to get things done. So, but if we're doing a very technical project, I'm looking for a lot more technical. Like, I'm looking to scale a team quickly. I'm looking for more leadership attributes in terms of empathy and kindness and sort of the things I want to see in sort of the growing culture of leaders. So the answer really depends on the problem that we're trying to solve.
So we had a guest in a recent episode. His name is Steve Collins. He's a multiple state champion basketball coach at the high school level. And he said that when he puts together a team of coaches, he is looking for three things. He's looking for a Yoda, which he said is somebody wiser, older than him. He said he's looking for a workhorse, somebody that's going to do the grunt work, and he looks for an adversary or a disruptor, somebody that's going to throw a wrench in their thinking so that they don't fall into a pattern of thinking all the same way. Do you look for that? Do you look for the disruptor? That's the one I want to focus on. Do you look for a disruptor?
Yeah, it's the thing that I always look for. The thing I strive to build in a team is trust and respect, because when someone trusts me and I trust them, what you just described, that ability to say, hey, Lopp, you're doing this wrong, and this is going to fail. They say that, and they say that fearlessly, and I hear that without like getting angry. I just go, oh my God, you're right. Or I say, no, I disagree with you, and here's why. And they say, like, no, X, Y, and Z, and we have this huge debate. But it never in that point did we start fighting because we didn't trust each other or didn't feel safe with each other. So those disruptor types are the people around you that are willing to tell you the truth no matter what. And they tend to do that when they feel safe and when they feel like you'll listen, and that there's no reprisals because, oh, I'm telling the boss or the manager or the leader, like, this is the way. So yeah, I look for that. But it's not something that necessarily shows up immediately. It's something you do once the team is gelling. And it's interesting because I can always tell with new managers that are working with me that, and it's a joyous moment for me when they first tell me something. They're like, hey, Lopp, I didn't understand that presentation. I'm like, you're right. I was super busy and I did a lousy job preparing on it. And I don't even care about the presentation. What I care is that person took the time to tell me something. I'm like, you're right. I kept on telling myself I could do it in the last minute, and it didn't come together for blah, blah, blah reason. And I love that. And it's, sometimes it's hard to hear that feedback, but when you trust each other and when you get along and you can speak the truth, and that's just, it's a team that I want to be a part of.
So you mentioned disagreement if they can express disagreement.
Yeah.
Some leaders, they try to shut down any sort of disagreement around a table because they don't want people to get their
Yeah.
feelings hurt. Do you kind of let it go to see what happens, or do you shut it down?
Well, there's a couple different versions. This is another it depends question. There's healthy disagreement. There's productive disagreement when we're like trying to explore a thing, and or we're trying to educate someone, or someone's trying to get an opinion out there that they don't understand the problem here. That is worth having that conversation and having that debate, and I will encourage that. Then there's just anger, or there's like uninformed just sort of attacks or something like that, where someone's just mad. And there's a million reasons for that, and it's not going to be a productive discussion. Someone just wants to like vent about the thing. So I get it. I get mad sometimes. I want to put my foot down and say blah. But that's sort of conversation, that sort of disrespectful conversation, or just a one that's not going to lead into something productive. It's just going to lead into a fight. I'll just shut that down, because you want those meetings to feel safe. And when someone is going to get randomly attacked and they don't feel safe, then that's not a team that that's not a meeting that you're gonna feel like you can be your best self in.
Okay, Rands. Let's talk about Rands. What is it? It's more than a name, isn't it?
Well, it is actually just a name. It's my wife's maiden name.
Oh,
So, yeah. So a million years ago, I was logging into some chat system somewhere, and back in the day, we all used fake names because we were scared about the internet, which was wise at the time, I guess. And I needed a short name, and I just logged in, and I was dating this girl, and her last name happened to be Rands. 5 letters, it's memorable, and da da da. So be careful what names you choose on the internet, because then I started writing a blog, and that took off, and then I started writing books and everything. So it's sort of I guess it's really the simple way to view it, is sort of my digital name. So when I'm like at a conference, remember when we went to conferences and saw people and stuff, people say Rands, and I know who they're talking about. They're talking about that guy on the internet. That's me. But that's where the name came from. So, and the books, I'm Rands in the books because a lot of the material there came from the weblog. So, and it's sort of, I don't know, it's sort of this comfortable, no longer anonymous. It used to be anonymous sort of way to kind of describe this person on the internet who talks about leadership a lot. But it's now got, like you said, it's kind of got a life of its own.
so would you say that's your sort of Chris Gaines?
Yeah, exactly. It's really strange. I do these charity T-shirts every year or so for selling them, for give all the money to charity, and it says Rands or something on it. And we always, my wife, we always give some to her family, and they don't understand why their name. They're like, "Why are you giving us shirts with our name on it?" I'm well, I kind of stole your name like 20 years ago, and they're like, "Okay, cool, that's just weird."
It's interesting because I'm guessing your wife took your name and you
She
stole
did.
hers.
Yeah, I did. It's exactly just a swap there. It worked out well. It's very fair and
Um,
balanced.
okay, let's talk about staff meetings. As a leader, what are your keys to a great staff meeting?
Yeah, it's to me. There's a couple of things, which is number one is to just recognize that it's an important time. It's the same thing as one-on-ones with me. It's every week at the same time, no matter what. This is not an optional meeting when you're busy. Like a staff meeting is the sort of the essential, one of the essential drum beats on the week. So number one is just making sure that you're doing it all the time, weekly, no matter what. Usually it's an hour. Early in the week to kind of set the tone and kind of like, okay, what are we doing this week? And sort of getting kind of shared consciousness around what's the struggle that we need to go through this week, and kind of get that out there. I generally start with some sort of recurring things around recruiting, and maybe some quality, some dashboards or some metrics or anything that's sort of like whatever we're working on right there. But I prefer to have the majority of it be something that someone else says, "Hey, I'd like to talk about this." So we have a Slack channel where my staff's all in, and anyone can add anything to the agenda, and they don't for months and months until like finally, convince someone to say, "Hey," someone they say in a one-on-one, "Hey, I'd love to talk about blah blah blah," and I'm like, "Hey, that's a great staff topic." So I want the majority of it to be sort of from the people, and have it be a conversation about whatever those topics are, with sort of just whatever we do kind of sprint-like things at the current place I work. So there's usually some sort of focus or theme to the week, whether it's, closing bugs, fixing performance bugs, or that sort of thing. So there's a little bit of status, but mostly it's sourced by the team, from the team.
Okay, so one, do you still meet if you don't have anything there is to discuss?
There's sometimes where it's all just me and it looks like it's about 15 minutes, and 9 times out of 10 we'll fill the time. Just random things will come up. So usually we will fill 45 minutes. But here's the other thing, and this is just an important meeting belief of mine, which is cool. We said everything, we did everything we said we were going to do. Let's just give the time back, right? And there's sometimes it's sort of like, well, this meeting is scheduled for 45 minutes, so we must fill it. No, you don't need to. We're done in 20 minutes. There's nothing else to talk about. Great, everyone, you get 25 minutes back. Have a great week, So, but in general, it's a health check to me to make sure that sort of staff meetings should be filled. There should be plenty for us to be able to talk about. And if it's not showing up, in one-on-ones, I'll be like, hey, so-and-so, you should, this is a good topic. Let's have this conversation with, all of your peers and see what they learn and kind of have it be a discussion.
And are you leading all of these topics, or sometimes are your staff members leading topics?
I will sort of run the conversation, but there's, it's a much, again, back to a health check. If it's always me, that's an issue. What I like to see after everyone kind of gets to know each other, 3-6 months in, is that, Julia is running it. It's her topic, and I can weigh in, but I'm just a participant. I'm not running it. I'll keep us on time. I will, like we said earlier, I'll kind of make sure everything's kind of, safe and, productive and headed in the right direction, or I'll nudge here. But it shouldn't all be me, because that's a boring meeting, and that's not really a learning moment, because like me lecturing and talking all the time is not, I mean, there's sometimes that's good, but I think I want to see other leaders have a chance to kind of wrangle this unique set of humans and have a conversation and do all the things that I kind of have learned to do in terms of running a staff meeting.
And if you're gone for any reason, do they meet anyways?
Yep. Yeah. 2 things happen. Number one, I'll send them along to my boss's staff meeting so they can see what that's like. Oh. And then let's just say I'm gone for 3 weeks, which never happens. But if I'm gone traveling or whatever, whenever that happens again, I'll rotate through and have someone else kind of be the Lopp.
Be the Lopp. In your book, The Art of Leadership, you talk about the new manager death spiral. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about that and tell us, what is that?
It's a long answer, but it's a talk that I've done a bunch, and it's a thing that I've watched happen with new leaders. And I think it's probably applies to more than engineers, but I think that there's this really tricky transition from an individual contributor to a manager. And I think about it from engineers again, but I maybe it's the same for other roles. So, but the thing that is really tricky about being a manager is that you've seen managers, you've had managers, you kind of think you know what it is, but it's literally a new job. It's a brand new job that even though you've been watching it done for a while, it's completely different. It's a completely different role. And what I see happen with a lot of new managers is that the death spiral kind of starts when they do the things to save themselves. They do the skills that they had as an IC, and they try to apply it as a manager. Let me give you a specific example, which is I'm a manager, I have a new feature, and we're behind. What do I do as an engineer? Well, I dig in, I work weekends, I work late, and I solve the problem by writing the code. I've seen a lot of new managers when their features are delayed or something's wrong, and that's what they do. They go back and they say, well, I'm an engineer, I can write code. And it's literally 100% the wrong thing to do, because you're not learning about being a manager and getting other people to rise up or to step up or figuring out other solutions that are not you doing the writing of the code. Every manager does this. And by the way, there's other things that you kind of regress back to being an IC. And it's just it's hard because those things that working hard, working late nights, rising to the occasion, those things that you're probably rewarded by being a manager. They made you, you're great, you're amazing, you always get it done, you should be a manager. It's hard because those skills no longer save you. You think they do, but you have to go learn other skills like delegation. Cool, we're behind. There's this big piece of code that needs to be written. It's not happening for X, Y, and Z reason. Who is someone I can give this work to? And I could do it because I used to be an engineer, but I need to give it to someone else and I need to coach them through it. You need to do this skill of like influencing, inspiring, getting folks to do things as opposed to doing the work yourself because you already know how to do the work. Like, yes, it maybe gets you the project done, but it doesn't advance you as a manager. So the new manager death spiral is these set of skills that you kind of need to get rid of. They're with you forever, and their experience you will always have. But it's about going and letting yourself fail at being a manager, which sounds really weird, or giving yourself the chance to learn all of those skills. And you're not going to be great at them automatically. You've got to go through some trials and tribulations. And it usually means that new managers have a bumpy first couple of years as they kind of get through that. And that's the death spiral, is those just kind of constantly going backwards. And it's sort of a amalgamation of all those things in one thing. It doesn't always happen like that, but it's more just an observation. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely it does. What I'm wondering is, apart from doing their work for them, are there any other things that can contribute to the new manager death spiral?
It's a good question. I think it's primarily that you regress back to what you were rather than advance forward into what you should be. And you can read the whole thing in the book or online. But the thing about the death spiral isn't just that you're choosing to go and do that work. It's that when others see you, the manager, going back and doing the work, being a coder again, they're probably thinking, thanks, that's great. But they're also saying like, why is he or she doing that? And it's actually sending really, really bad signal to the team about trust, right? Like he or she doesn't know how to get this done. And again, it's sort of the worst way to kind of view the scenario. And I'm not trying to rip on that person that's going to work weekends or whatnot, but there's so many other consequences to regressing back to what you were when you should be figuring out how to be a leader. What are the other solutions besides falling backwards? It's all of the other perspective around what happens to these managers when they choose to regress.
Fascinating. Really is. Let's talk about something else. Gossip and rumors. Now, you've talked about it in YouTube videos, and it's in your book, and how it can infect your company and what it says about your culture. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's going back to staff meetings. It's one of my recurring agenda topics is gossip, rumors, and lies. And it's a bulleted list. Everyone sees it the morning before in the Slack channel, and they giggle when they see that. But it's actually serving a really important purpose, which is this is me and my leadership team getting together, and we're just kind of throwing out there. It's like, what are you hearing? Like, what's going on? And by the way, no one really kind of throws anything else the first couple of times. So when they start to they hear something in the hallway or in a Slack channel, and they're like, that seems weird. That can't be. And they learn, they're like bringing it up in my staff meeting. They're like, hey, did you hear this crazy thing? And we're like, no, that seems really, really odd. And we talk about it. Or sometimes someone says, oh, I know what that is. That's a misinterpretation of this other thing. And I'm being abstract here because we're talking about a hypothetical here. But what they're actually saying is this. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. That totally makes sense. And what we've done in that moment, if we've taken something that's kind of weird, gossipy lie, and we've turned it into truth, and then that group of people is now taking that piece and they're injecting truth into the bloodstream, as opposed to going and saying, wondering what's going on here. So I think leaders job, because we tend to hear a lot of things and we tend to be a spreader of information. You want to spend a chunk of your time both listening and going like, okay, what's going on here? What's going on here? And then taking that stuff, looking at it objectively, going like, okay, cool. This is some information. I'll pass it along. Or like, seems like this is a total, I don't understand this at all. And it's because that person over the other team is super mad and they're going to say this thing because they're mad and they want to be hurtful, and they say it to something and someone else says it to someone, and suddenly you're in the grapevine, and this thing, which is just someone being mad at this one person a week ago, is now out there wandering around, and it's this untruth and it's this toxic thing, and it's actually doing harm to the culture, to the team in some way. And I think you got to have some sort of counter to that, and so that's why I spend time every staff meeting, just kind of like, let's diffuse some of the lies that we heard this week. So that's what I think. That's what I talk about it. It's just you're in this privileged position as a leader to be exposed to a lot, because you're in a lot of meetings and you hear a lot of things. I think part of your responsibility is to not take everything that you're hearing at face value, but to challenge it a little bit and to try to bring some truth to it.
So would you subscribe to, or does this go directly against that idea of don't give any breath to that sort of thing, or don't give it any life?
I mean, I am, but let's just say it's something horrible and it's meant to be something to spread. What we're going to do is talk about it, and we're going to either kill it and just say like, well, that's garbage. Let's not repeat that ever again, everybody. Or we're going to say, oh, there's some truth here, but it's this little slice of truth. Or this doesn't happen like, no, this is the truth. This horrible thing is actually happening and we should be alarmed, right? So it's doing our job as leaders to sort of look at things and analyze them and turn them, either kill them or to turn them into something actionable. Oh my God, I didn't know this. Let's run this up the flagpole and get everything started to kind of fix this impending disaster that we just heard about.
Let's talk about culture. I mean, that's kind of what we're talking about now, but there are good culture and there's bad culture.
Yeah.
And I know that you've been a part of good culture and bad culture. And so I'm sure it's different, in each situation. But are there any consistent things you see in good culture and any consistent things you always see in bad culture?
Yeah, the thing that is the universal thing in bad culture is bad politics. Now, politics is there's good politics and there's bad politics, but it's bad politics which almost always results in cultures that I find offensive. And there's lots of traits there, that some of which we've already talked about, which number one, which is like, are we actively listening to the grapevine, the gossip, and are we like fixing it? Or are we just kind of going like, oh, well, that's that marketing team and they're a bunch of idiots, so let's just ignore them, right? I'm obviously making this up. So, or there's, people who are jockeying for position because it's rapid growth. There's a million reasons for it, but when it's kind of when it's the bad version of politics, it usually translates into the bad version of the cultures I find to be just abhorrent. I've had teams before that came out of companies that I knew were super negatively political, and they brought that with them. And I had to actually work with those teams to they thought that was the way. And it wasn't. It's not. But they lived with it for so long, they thought that that's the way that kind of groups of humans got along. So kind of knowing that I was handed this deck of cards, I went in and then I actively worked to kind of demonstrate, hey, by the way, this way that you're acting, this is it. I know that this is sort of familiar, and I know that people can say whatever they want in the hallways or whatnot, but you're actively contributing to sort of a gossipy sort of culture here, and that's hurting us. And and this is usually when I have a really good example of something that I've found in a staff meeting or a one-on-one or something where someone's like, hey, so-and-so saying this, right? It's just hold it up and say like, is this true? And they're like, no, that was just me talking to Bob. I'm like, okay, so cool. We talked about the staff meeting because this really pissed off these three people. And I know you were just talking to Bob, but you're a leader, and part of your job is to like speak the truth, or to be, or to be supportive, whatever it is. And I had to spend a lot of time to actually go and sort of fix it. It's hard, but it's super hard because, especially at scale, when there's a lot of people, because there's just some habits we have as humans that are suboptimal.
So, good leaders can be a part of a bad culture because they're trying to turn it into a good culture. I'm wondering if does it go the other way? Can it ever happen the other way where bad leaders are a part of a good culture?
Oh, sure, yeah, and that he or she is sort of infecting the badness with their behavior. Yeah, absolutely. Um, and there, to your point, that's actually even worse because people tend to give that person, because it says leader on their business card, a little bit more credence, and they start to go like, "Oh, he's amazingly successful, so I guess yelling at people is okay." It's never okay. Like, I'm sure that people do it and have seen it and received it. It's never okay in my book. That's a bad culture where you would treat the person with disrespect by yelling at them, right? And because it says manager on their card or leader on their card or whatever, that doesn't make it okay. So it is. It is. You can definitely have cultures where you have some bad apples in a good culture, lowercase apples.
What is the best leadership advice you've ever been told?
I had a really good manager who taught me something that I always forget. He said, "Be aware what you're good at, and focus on that, and let yourself go. Even though you're good at it, Lopp, these are the things that you're amazing at. Here's the thing: you don't think it's a big deal because they're easy to you, so you just do them. But you kind of sometimes will shy away and go focus on the things that you're not as good at, because yes, there's some things to be learned there, but you're good at these things over here. Go be great at those things that you already have a disproportionate advantage at." So that was the first part. He's like, "I know you're an engineer. I know you can code. You're never going to be Mozart. You're always going to be like a B engineer, but you're an A leader. And here's the reasons why." But he also sees like, so the things that you're not going to be that great at, and this goes back to the advice from earlier, he's like, build a team so that those things that you're going to get a C or a B on will always be an A because you're giving it to Ross. And Ross is a plate spinner, and he's the best plate spinner that you've ever seen. And he does it in his sleep. That's your guy. That's what you want to bolt him on. So you got to be able to, but you have to be willing to like give away that, be aware that's not your area of strength. Trust someone else to do that and give them all the plates so they can do that job. So
That's great. Okay, so lastly, with leadership, and then we're going to take a slight turn towards education. Um, when you are looking to hire somebody, what are you looking for in
Yeah.
someone?
I mean, it goes back to what we said before. I have some sort of rough shape of a human that I'm looking for this role. So I'm mostly I'm exclusively hiring leaders right now. So from whatever team, if I'm building the team or I inherited the team, there's usually some deficiencies, it depends on the team, but like, this is a great team of humans that's really works on the feels, and they're really good at growth, but their technical acumen is a B. So I'm gonna hire an amazing technical leader, or I'm looking for less white dudes. It's all white dudes, so a little bit of diversity there. It's any number of things. That's the thing I'm looking for. Is first is sort of like, am I clear about sort of what do I need to kind of bring into the mix to have a more interesting sort of diverse leadership team, and then it's sort of, are they meeting that bar? Are they fitting that sort of thing that I'm looking for? The other thing is and this is just off the top of my head, we do so much. We're doing it right now. Communication is such a big part of leadership. If we are doing 45-minute interview and I'm having difficulty communicating with you during this interview, and I will calm you down about being nervous about talking to Lopp and all those sorts of things. But if it's 40 minutes and we're still not on the same frequency, that's a pretty yellow to red flag to me, just because we're going to be doing this. This is pre-COVID. We're going to be doing this all the time. and a leader has to be able to communicate things. So I'm really looking to find a really complex topic and that we're going to talk about, and we're going to go back and forth on it. But that communication piece is really, really important. And I know when it's nerves, and I know when they're, they're just, that they're a little bit triggered because of the interview. But that's a communication is a really big part for it for me as well.
So how do you balance, because not every hire has a perfect history. How do you balance, that idea of past performance equals future success? Um, how do you balance their history, if they may not have a perfect history, with the potential that they could have in your company?
Um, I was just rewriting this chapter I put in the first book. I call it a glimpse and a hook, and it's how I scan a resume, and you just put it in a good, I'm going to steal your line. I'm kind of am gauging potential based off a resume, which is totally unfair because resumes are not a good way to do it. But I'm kind of looking at it, and I'm looking at the choices that you've made in terms of the companies that you've worked at, how long you've been there, and all like extracurriculars and all these sort of things. Because I'm kind of looking at the things that you want to go do. That it's telling what you've done tells me about sort of the arc that you want to be on. So for example, and again, made up, but like you've spent the last 14 years at IBM. No, fine, different strokes for different folks. This is someone who likes stability. This is someone who likes to focus on a thing. And that's great. That is like amazing. Godspeed. I work at startups, and everyone there, I've been working at startups for the last decade. Those folks want to go climb the hill, the big hill, the steep hill. They want to go do it again and again and again. So I'm looking for those folks that are hungry to do that sort of thing. So that's what I'm looking for. It does tell me about potential, but it's interesting you asked the question because I always ask the same question. This question late in the interview, I say, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And everyone laughs and they giggle a little bit. And then I ask this to everybody, whether you're an intern or you're a seasoned veteran, because I want to hear what their answer is. Because their answer can be a lot of different answers. But it can't be about potential. It's this, what is this thing that you want to go do next, right? And sometimes they take it very literally and say, well, I want this job. Other people are like, I just love baking. Baking is just my jam. And once I've done tech for the next 10 years and have enough money, I'm opening a bakery. That's just, number one, just a good story, but it is also, it tells me a lot about the sort of the potential of the person, right? What do they want to do? And like, there's nothing negative in that. I'm not like suddenly, this is a made up person, by the way, although someone did say this once. I'm like, that's great. I hired the person, by the way, and they worked for me for 4 years, and I don't think they work at a bakery yet, but I really hope they get there at some point.
Okay, I want to press a little bit more on this about judging potential versus past failures.
Well, number one, the most interesting stories I can tell you about, and I capture them all because I write them all down, are usually about failures. So failures are the things that actually teach you the most. So it's not something. It's not something I acted. I know that I've had interviews before. It's like, what is your biggest failure, and how did you recover it from this sort of thing? Those are interesting things to know. But to me, it's. I'm not looking at a resume because that's what I'm kind of gauging on it, and I'm not like digging in to find failures when I'm talking to someone, because like I think there's something interesting about that. But I think the thing about, I already said it, but the thing about failures to me is like, failure is like fear. You can sit there and obsess about it and say I failed or I'm scared of this thing, or you can realize that it's your brain telling you to pay attention. This hurt. This sucked. This thing that happened. This is a great moment for you to kind of go and say, wait, how did I get here? This is awful. I don't ever want to be here again. And it's, to me, once you get past sort of like the misery of failing or feeling fear, it's this moment to really learn. I think the folks that are probably the most capable humans that I've worked with, full of failure. They've done it all the time, and it hasn't wrecked them. It's taught them. Well, that's a good answer. I'm glad we're recording this.
Yeah, write it down. All right, we're gonna jam on the brakes, take a turn towards education.
Okay.
Who is the teacher that had the biggest impact on your life?
Mrs. Kirkish, who was my second grade teacher. I don't know what happened. Actually, I do know now that I think about it. She's a really good leader. I'm mostly an introvert, and public speaking was really hard for me until about 5-6 years ago, and I focused on it, failed a lot, and got better at it. Mrs. Kirkish had me doing cartwheels in front of the class and being the lead in the school play and doing all these things that literally for the next 10 years after I didn't do ever again. But I knew that I could. And when I chose, for whatever reason, after being a horrible teenager or whatever, when I chose to sort of grow myself again and be mature about it, I always remembered Mrs. Kirkish because she just inspired me to be like this in present day terms, sort of this public speaker, this visible figure, this person who is joyful and talks about failure and fear and blah, blah, blah. All these, like, it's that me, that second grader who had so much fun having a great leader. She taught me a lot about it. And it wasn't until years later that I actually recognized that, like, having that experience very young and it being different than every other class that I had for the next 15 years after, and there were plenty of good teachers after that as well, that it taught me so much about like what good leadership looked like. So Mrs. Kirkish, second grade. Have
you ever told her that, or is she still alive?
Yeah, I sent her my book, my first book when I published it. Found her and I said, thank you.
That's awesome.
There was a couple teachers. There was a fourth grade teacher, Mrs. Ackerman as well, who she's like, well, this is fourth grade. She's like, when you write a book, can you send me a copy? And I'm like, I'm thinking like coloring book or like fourth grade, or what does that mean? So yeah, send her a copy of the book
and send her an invoice too, right? What do you wish schools would focus more on or teach more of?
Yeah, my son goes to upstate New York, Rochester, RIT, and the reason he thinks he made this choice, but it was actually me many years ago, because the first time at Apple, I was out there recruiting, and they do something that I think is incredibly powerful, which is they have, and a lot of schools have this now, they have these co-ops where you don't go for a summer, you go for 6 months. You basically need to do a year of in-industry work to graduate from computer science. I don't think it's all the majors there. So it's a 5-year program. And one of those years, you're spending 6 months in a company doing the thing. And the thing that I have noticed, the thing I noticed actively was I kept on hiring these RIT kids. And why? It's because they hit the ground running, because they'd done so much of the actual work. So we weren't training them. They had seen what it was like, and they were there for longer than like a 6-week sort of internship. They were there for 6 months. So they went through some stuff. They shipped a feature, or they were there for a major part of it. And we didn't treat them like interns. Interns are great, by the way, but like, because they were there so long, they were just like, oh yeah, this is John, and John's been here for 4 months, and he's running the database layer because he's good at that. So giving them the chance while they're doing all this incredibly important work about learning how to learn, let them learn about how to do the work in a way in the world, right? I think that's really a powerful thing. So more of that, more of them having the opportunity to build things in the real world.
And what is a childhood experience that you felt shaped you most profoundly?
I've been keeping a journal since I've been 11, so like constantly. So
that's dedication.
Yeah, I just writing is I was just writing before I got on with you. I was finishing up this chapter I was working on. I write every day, and I had an interview at Apple. The first time I I was moving jobs the first time that I was there, and one of the VPs asked me, she said, "Does writing make you smarter?" And my book had just come out, and I was first book, and I was like, "Yes, absolutely it does." And she's like, she was expecting sort of this humble, like, no, it's just kind of this project that I have in a hobby. I'm like, no, I'm like, this is 100% makes me smarter. And she's like, tell me more. I'm like, here's the thing. Like, I'm kind of this nervous dude who's an introvert, and I have lots of thoughts, and writing, the act of taking the words in my head and passing them through my fingers and getting them on a page, seeing them, rearranging them, it teaches me how I feel about a thing, or teaches me how I want to understand a thing. So usually I'm on a bike ride or something, I'm like, oh, that's an interesting thought. And I kind of park it, and then I pass it through my fingers and I write it down. So that came from just always wanting to get what was in my head out on a paper. And when you write every day, it's a powerful skill for capturing what you're thinking, not just capturing, but shaping it. Because sometimes I'm like, oh, that's an interesting title for something. I wonder what it's going to be about. And then I write the piece, and I'm like, well, the title doesn't make any sense anymore. But this piece showed up because of it, and I have to rewrite the title now. So it's the thing. I learned early that how much writing could bring to me, and everything, including my wife, everything that I've done that's important in my life has come as a function of writing. I don't write resumes anymore because people go like, "Oh, you wrote books, so we'll check the books." I'm like, "That's a good idea," Not that I'm interviewing or anything like that, but everything that's important to me has come as a function of me choosing to do a lot of writing.
Okay, I want to ask you a question about that. I'll come back to it. My question that I want to ask you now, though, is a question you ask everyone in interviews.
Sure.
What do you want to be when you grow up?
I normally have a pithy answer to this, but here we are in early January of 2021, which I think we can agree could be a better year. I actually don't know right now. I work at Apple, and I'm having an amazing time there. But I'm trying to figure out sort of what is that thing that I want to go do. The thing I'm doing right now, which is building product at Apple, is absolutely a privilege to be able to go do. But is that what I'm going to do for the next 20 years? Probably not. So I'm actually really kind of searching for that answer right now, and it's a little alarming to me that I don't know, because it's been very well defined to me. I'm like, want to do a startup? Great, doing a startup. Well, I want to be a VP. Great, being a VP. I want to be a VP at this company. Okay, that's what we're doing. I want to publish a book. We publish books. So there's this next big thing that I've spent a lot of time during our holiday break trying to really search and find that, because I don't know. And again, I say that with a lot of fear in my heart, because it's like, shoot, I always make fun of my wife. She is far superior to me in all ways. But she's also very similar to me, is when we don't have a project, we're the worst. When we don't have that thing that we're doing, it's just like, we're like bumping around into things, and I have a thing that I'm doing, and I'll be doing for a good many years at Apple. But what do I want to be when I grow up? I'm actively working on that question right now, and I've never answered that question that way, by the way.
Now, as we close out, what is some closing advice you have for everyone?
Well, number one, know what you want to be when you grow up. I think that's probably the first thing. I think the thing I've been thinking a lot about for the last year or so is, and it has a lot to do with sort of things we're going through right now, is remaining. I think one of the things I look for, going back to a question you asked before in interviews, is like, I always looking for curious people who are like, why does this happen this way? Oh, interesting. Oh, asking questions. Well, it happens this way over here. Why does it happen this way? Like, and so curious people I find endlessly fascinating. I think it's a very healthy sort of a leading indicator of leadership. But there's another part that I think is really important, which is understanding the truth when you are curious about a thing. And I think staying curious and speaking the truth are, I think, two things that leaders should be doing all of the time.
So you thought we were going away, but we're not. We're going to stay right here. And for today's episode, we are including the curtain call in today's episode. So now I can ask you, Michael, a question that I had before, which is, you talked about how you got your wife through your writing. What do you mean by that?
My wife, let's see. No, was it second year after college? She moved to northern Italy, and we were dating before she left, and she was going to be there for a while. And I remember when she said goodbye, we were like, bye. We'd been dating for like 6 months, and it was pretty serious. And I'm like, this is the one. And she left, and she's like, oh, that was nice. But I was like, this is the one. I wrote her every day for a year and a half, every single day. And by the way, she like answered nicely the first couple of times. And then she kind of like, he's still writing, and then kind of waited off, and then kept writing every single week. And then it came back when she realized, oh, he's really serious. So we have all of those letters in this big book now. But she was like,
it's the Notebook.
Exactly. It's the Notebook. It's huge. I haven't looked at it recently. But it was, well, she was very far away, and we're kind of pre-internet here, so there's not a lot of like email and whatnot going on. So it was handwritten letters for like a good long period of time. So, and I remember, I can tell you, down the street in Los Gatos, which is nearby where I live, at the coffee shop, I'd sit down there every Sunday night, write 7 pages or whatever it was every week. So it's not the reason. I have other attributes besides being a writer that are kind of winning as well. It was one of the reasons we ended up together.
So you said that for the past 10 years you've been at startups, but you're Apple. Would you include that as a startup?
No. I was at Apple, and then I left Apple in about 8.5 years ago, and I went to Palantir, then I went to Pinterest, and I went to Slack. So I did three startups in a row. So, and then I came back to Apple because startups are a lot of work. Apple is too.
Is what you're doing at Apple a startup thing?
No, I'm doing things for the whole big company there. But one of the things I do love about my current company is it's very don't tell them this, but it's very startup-y inside of Apple. And it's okay. They I don't want them to know that because there's probably people that feel like it's a big company thing. It's not. It's very deliberately startup-y, which sounds strange. I'm sure there's lots of people at Apple who don't feel that at all. But to me, it's very scrappy. Everyone feels like they have a voice, and it's just a lovely place to build software.
So let's say you hop in the car, you're going to go for a drive for 30 minutes. What are you listening to on the radio or your devices?
Music or podcast?
It's up to you. Doesn't matter.
Golly, I feel like, I tend to, I have this Spotify playlist, which is Daily Drive. Not that we're driving anymore, but you said I was in a car. So it's normally that, which is sort of this kind of Designed by Robots podcast, which has a little bit of news in it, but it also goes through and kind of sniffs through my music and kind of plays back things that are familiar and some new stuff as well. So that, a little bit of music and then a little bit of news, a little bit of podcasts in there.
And if you could make one change in the United States, what would that change be?
Ooh, my gosh. That's a loaded one. I wanted to do this startup years ago around the sourcing of the truth. So that when something was a verifiable fact that you could, like a footnote or, whatever, you could say, this is sourced back to this statement. Michael Lopps' middle name is Lawrence, is linked back to this source of truth there, which is a verifiable source of truth. I would love to see that sort of idea, and it's happening right now in a lot of social media and whatnot, that idea of people, of information, of things that are factual and truth being just kind of how we act. I'm deeply terrified of humans who don't seem to understand that facts are facts, and the truth is the truth. You can have opinions and you can have feelings about a thing, but at the end of the day, there's got to be some set of things there that we all agree are the facts. So there's something there.
Do you like what Facebook and YouTube are doing by slapping some articles with fact checking and whatnot?
I would prefer that the human beings with their gray matter had the facilities to understand how to do that without Facebook or whatever social media doing it, because I think that's actually the more interesting thing, is that someone has the ability and the cognitive ability to go and choose between A and B and have an opinion about it and healthily defend that opinion in a way that is not hurtful and is a way that is informed by facts and sometimes opinion. So I understand why they're doing it, but I think it's because humans are starting to kind of rely on these things for their information, and sometimes it's information and sometimes it's not.
Okay, so we have two more questions for you. One, what is your thought about aliens? Do you think there's alien life out there? Do you have some information for us?
Do you remember, I don't know how old you are. I'm older than
33.
You. But do you remember, you're 30. Okay, I'm older than you by many years. But there was a time, remember, and this is interesting about what I just said about facts, where they said Earth is the only planet in the solar system. Now, what they were saying was actually factually correct because they hadn't found any other, right? So this is the truth. It was truth. We don't currently know of any other planets, but we're kind of sitting here kind of going like, that seems unlikely, right? Like I'm guessing, just going to go out here on a limb here and say, yeah, there's other planets. And it turns out, because telescopes got better, blah, 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 they now have thousands, millions, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Like these rules that got this solar system probably apply elsewhere. So if you follow that, then I don't know what it looks like, but it makes sense to me. It makes sense to me that there's got to be something else out there. So it's the same thing there. Of course, haven't seen it. So if you said, is there other? I'm like, oh, I have no factual evidence to do it. But it kind of seems like, given the size of the things and the numbers, which I can't even conceive, there's got to be someone out there. So
wouldn't it be great if you could have like an out-of-body experience where they took you up into their spacecraft and then you looked and they were all using Apple devices?
That would freak me out.
Yeah. It'd be interesting, though. It'd be interesting. And last question, what would be your favorite sweet food you would eat if you wanted to junk on something?
It changes, and I have a sweet tooth. I'm currently a fan of the mint orange lifesavers. I have a bag of them right over here. I know, they're amazing. So individual servings of mint orange lifesavers. I didn't even know they were a thing, and I saw them on Amazon one day, and now I'm addicted. So, but you could ask me 2 weeks, and it'd be something else.
Awesome. Michael Lopps, can you tell us where people can connect with you at?
Yeah, there's the Rands and Repose leadership blog that you're talking about. There's also a leadership Slack that I run. It's got about 15,000 leaders there. So if you're interested in that, go type in Rands Leadership Slack on the internet and it'll lead you there.
Awesome. Well, Michael, thank you so much for your time with us. And thank you for listening and watching. We hope that this has been a great reprieve for you, that you've learned something, that you've grown and become better and more. If you would like to find out more interviews from us, click subscribe below, and you can also find links to Michael Lopps' websites and books you can buy by clicking the links below. And you can go to our website, which you can watch more interviews at thedirectorspodium.com, which is about teaching and that sort of thing. And there's leadership at leadingchangepodcast.com. We hope that we've given you some inspiration to continue doing the vital work it is you do. Remember, get some rest. You deserve it.